The only school that teaches you about money is the School of Hard Knocks. Until now.
You need to learn this business, and this is the time to do it.
Become an insider, so you have to know the rules before you get in the game.
Welcome to the Money MBA Podcast.
Have I got your attention now?
Where you'll learn how to be a master of money.
There's so many ways to make money today.
Let me show you in 2 seconds flat why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Now here's your host, Jonathan Kutsmita.
Welcome to the Money MBA Podcast. Today's guest is Raoul Pal of Global Macro Investor. He's also the CEO of Real Vision TV. What makes this interview special, as you can find tons of interviews with Raoul, whether it be on his own network, Real Vision TV, or another podcast where he's talking about the financial markets. He's a really deep thinker. He's very generous with his time, and he goes into great depths to share his thoughts and ideas on markets. All of that is super valuable, and we definitely discuss that in this interview. We talk Bitcoin, we talk the market as a whole, where he kind of sees things going, and it's super insightful. But what makes me excited to share this interview is we actually talk about Raoul's journey as an entrepreneur. There's some interesting insights, stories that you've never heard before, that Raoul hasn't shared before, and some interesting perspectives, including the fact that Raoul may actually be the original travel blogger. That story and many more are in this interview, so I really look forward to sharing it with you. I hope you enjoy. Let's go check it out.
All right.
Well, Raoul, I appreciate it, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, before starting this, I was going to do a bit of let me do research on Raoul, and let's have a little bit of a bio ready. But it's just so deep and granular in many ways. I figured I'd just put it right back on your plate so you can share with the audience, who you think you are these days, considering your story is long and detailed.
Yeah, that's a good question. What I am now is I am the CEO and co-founder of Real Vision, which is the kind of world's premier video-on-demand channel for finance. It's kind of the Netflix of finance, but it's basically a media business overall. Additionally, I also write and publish the Global Macro Investor, which I've been doing for 15 years now, which is a kind of high-end global macroeconomic research service for the world's biggest hedge funds, family offices, investment banks, that kind of stuff. But my background, obviously you can tell I'm English, but I live in the Cayman Islands. I was living in Spain for 10 years, and prior to that, England, where I was predominantly in the finance industry. So I worked for Goldman Sachs, where I started and managed the hedge fund sales business in equities and equity derivatives. And then I then went to my largest customer, who was a hedge fund called GLG Partners, which was the largest hedge fund firm in Europe, where I started and ran the Global Macro Hedge Fund. And then I kind of opted out of the rat race at 36 and moved to Spain to start writing. And then I somehow got sucked back in to build a media business in the Cayman Islands, which is now global.
I love I opted out at 36. So many of us would love that option. So how did you actually get started in the game? Was it something at a young age you wanted to be in finance? Was your father an investor?
No. So my father was in marketing. So he was marketing director of Xerox in Europe. And I was toying with the idea of marketing or finance. Now, when I was in my kind of late teens, early 20s, we were talking about the late 80s. Late 80s was braces, red Porsches, stock market crashes, the glamour, it was all happening. It was the racy 80s. And so that's what you saw everywhere. And it was incredibly inspiring. I remember talking to my father about it, and he would say, well, marketing, maybe this thing for you. And I was interested in that too. And then one day, it was my father's birthday, and he had a party at the house. And I was speaking to a friend of his. He said, so Raoul, what are you going to do when you finish university? And I'm like, well, I don't really know. I'm kind of studying economics and economics, law and statistics. He's like, well, you should have a think about it. What are the two options? I said, well, it's either going to be marketing or finance. He goes, it's really simple, Raoul. You can go and work for Mars. They're a fantastic marketing company, and you'll get given free Mars bars. Or you can go and work for a bank, and you'll get given free money. And that was the epiphany. Unfortunately, I graduated in 1990, which was a banking recession. So it was a recession in the UK. It was a full banking recession in the US as well, with the savings and loan crisis. So I've still got a drawer, well, it's now a box full of rejection letters from every single firm I ever applied to. And I then applied for marketing jobs too, got rejected from all of those as well. And then eventually through the back door, I'd done an internship at a company called Dow Jones Telerate, which was a predecessor to Thomson Reuters and Bloomberg. And I kind of begged my way in there, and I got a kind of graduate trainee job there. And a year and a half later, 2 years later, having been taught selling, which was one of the most useful things I've ever been taught, I went on a proper sales course, negotiation skills course, all of that. I then wormed my way into an investment bank called James Capel, which is part of HSBC, and it was a very fancy stockbrokers to the Queen business, but it was the European leader in equity derivatives, and I joined that business.
Well, you don't have to be modest about it. I'd really like to know how much, that early part of your career that propelled you forward. And I believe you at one point had part of your career you worked with Paul Tudor Jones and some amazing investors like that. How much of it do you think it was your tenacity? I mean, like you say, you still have this box of rejection letters, and how much of it was it connection? I mean, and a big part of what you're doing with Real Vision is kicking down that wall where if you're not, right next to the fountain, you don't really ever get access not only to the opportunities, but the information.
Yeah, and I think as opposed to, there's two types of salespeople, opportunists. One are the people who will kind of play the numbers game and have tenacity, or the others that look at it as a creative problem to be solved. And that's how I look at it. So you try and think, how do I get in? If I can't get goal A, how can I get goal B that will get me to that eventually? So that was why Dow Jones Telerate was the way to get me in. And that's how my whole career has been the same thing, is I project where I'm trying to get to and then adjust paths accordingly en route. Because what you don't know is when you take the first step from here is how you're going to get to there. If you look backwards and kind of live in the future, which is I do in the macro world, you live in the future, you look back and it's clearer to see the path of how to get there. If that makes sense.
There's a great quote from Steve Jobs. I think it's at a commencement speech where he says you cannot connect the dots forward. You can always only connect them backwards.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I feel like for so many entrepreneurs, there's so many cliches of quitting just before the finish line, and I think your story is a great story in that you basically took how old were you when you started Real Vision? If you don't mind me asking.
No, it's 4 years ago. So what was that? That'll be 47.
So you took like a 30-some year detour to doing what's really in your soul, which is being an entrepreneur, right?
Yes, but if you treat everything like you're an entrepreneur, it's the same thing because it is the same methodology. So how do you build? So don't forget, when I started in the hedge fund sale, I started in the sales business servicing hedge funds. Don't forget, there was no salesman servicing hedge funds because hedge funds were very new. So I was one of the few people in Europe doing it. So you were basically an entrepreneur because you had to figure out how to do it. Now, as everybody will tell you, you get the lucky break. And I had the lucky break because I'd been promoted to the head of the desk at James Capel, and I was moving the team to NatWest, which was a big UK bank at the time. They were much more kind of global. And at that time, a bunch of people from Morgan Stanley had joined, like 120 people. And I was given a new job. So I just joined, and they were like, sorry, your job's changed. What do you want to do? And I said to the guy, you know what I really want to do? I'd like to look after hedge funds globally. He said, fine. Who are the 10 largest hedge funds in the world you'd like to speak to? I gave him the list, said, these are the people I want to speak to. He said, right, fly over to New York next week. I'll introduce them to all. And that's when I got introduced to Paul Tudor Jones, Lewis Bacon, all of these people. And that was the lucky break because I then became the guy in Europe who knew all of those guys. And again, I just treated it as an entrepreneur.
But you asked for the opportunity, right? Most people aren't willing to kind of, number one, visualize it, let alone try to kick down that door. And all you had to do is ask. So it's a bit of luck, but you had the vision to say that there was an opportunity there.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because you're living in the future. So you're thinking, where am I going to make the most money in this business? Not necessarily for me personally, but for the business that I'm in. Where can I really build a business? Well, I was realizing the trajectory the hedge funds are on. And so just, swim, skate to where the puck is going, as they say.
Right.
Much easier.
Well, the old Gretzky line.
Yeah.
So you, and at what point do you feel like you had a bit more out of that niche or out of that circle exposure? I think one of the first times I came across your name is you wrote a very interesting article. I think it was back in 2000. It was Endgame or something along those lines. Do you think that had any, was that something that propelled you into the broader audience?
Yes.
In any kind of way?
My world had been very small. So once I started writing Global Macro Investor, I had a number of high-paying clients, small network of the macro funds. Very few people know these guys in the outside world. Yep. Nobody was famous. There was nobody, obviously George Soros wasn't, a few, the big guys, but most people didn't know this world. So that was the world I carved out for myself. And people would know me because I had a business card that didn't even have a phone number on it. And it didn't have an address.
True James Bond. It's not just the accent.
Just an email address. And they knew that there's this guy who left Goldman Sachs, ran a hedge fund, now lives on the side of a mountain in a beach town in Spain and kind of gives his prognosis of the world from the mountain. And all of these really famous guys listen to him. Uh-huh. So that became the myth.
So you're the original travel blogger.
That's right, exactly right. Because I'd done what everybody wanted, which was to give up. Right. And go and do something else. Everyone was like, oh my God, he's figured it out. And it wasn't because I was the richest man in the world. It's just that I'd thought, okay, there's a different way of doing this. Right. So yeah, not
to interrupt you, I don't think people know this about you, Raoul, that this really is your story, that you were the guy trying to be on the beach, to do it different. I mean, that's right. I think most entrepreneurs are motivated by that. You're not just the guy who wants to make a ton of money by getting the right, financial bet.
No, that's right. It was really all about lifestyle and, that balance of because if you're going to be an entrepreneur and if you want to have those kind of opportunistic goals, it needs to be about life in general. It can't be, and it's not, I want to be rich and I want to buy a nice car. It's got to be a whole kind of holistic view on what you want out of life. You've got one shot at it, don't screw it up.
So I interrupt you, but I asked you about that article you wrote and
so
you had a small network.
So that article was random. So I had never appeared on TV. I'd never done anything. I've been below the radar screen, and that's the world. Because don't forget, really, the internet in terms of blogging and stuff was taking off, but it wasn't really my world. So then I went to a Morgan Stanley conference in Shanghai. They flew me for one day, and I flew back that night. I mean, it was a brutal trip.
That is brutal.
I presented at the Morgan Stanley Alternative Investment kind of conference. And this was when I was living in Spain, watching Europe about to crumble. The Spanish banking system got within a week of total collapse until the ECB forced the Spanish to take money to inject into their banking system. It was so bad that people don't know that the banks were turning depositors into preference shareholders and then defaulting on them. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on. So people were getting screwed all over the place. And I thought the system was going to shut down in Spain. So I had to go and buy a generator. I had to buy food and I had to get cash. I mean, I'm not that kind of guy, but it became bloody close to the edge. So I wrote about it from the trenches saying the end game is so close and that it got leaked by somebody and it got leaked to Zero Hedge. And then it got leaked onto Business Insider. And then it became the biggest financial article in the history of the internet back then in 2012. And, it was like 20 or 30 million people had read it by the end of it. So, and that made me realize that maybe I could communicate with larger numbers of people. And what did that mean? And what do people need? And it joined the dots for me about what happened over the financial crisis when I realized that the media had let people down. And people had not been told what many of us at the heart of the financial system knew, the kind of the rotting core and the risks there. And that was the genesis of what formed Real Vision, was the fact that endgame article came. And I realized, okay, there is a way to communicate with larger groups of people.
So spot on. I think another reason I got very drawn into your world early on with Real Vision is that realization that I wanted access to this other information that just I didn't have access to, that didn't exist. I wasn't part of that Wall Street world. I had a general concept of how most of it worked. I started my business, a mortgage-related finance consulting business, at the heart of the crisis. Watching all this happen, it just kind of sends you down this rabbit hole. But the rabbit hole is really shallow at that point, right? And that's
Yes.
what eventually led me into the Fin-twit world. And then you start getting all this back and forth. And kind of before I go any further than that, tell us a little bit more about Fin-twit. Like, how would you define it? What's your relationship with it? And for the audience in general, is it something that should embrace?
I didn't really understand what Twitter was. And then I just started being me. So I thought, okay, if people have an online personality. So I just thought, fuck it, I'm just going to be myself. And I'm going to try and treat people with respect and request that people try and treat me with that. And I'm going to treat the community as I would like it to operate, in a way that I just thought, if we could ask it questions and we can rely on it and we could be good to it and we can feed it. So I always spend time making sure I put content out there that I think is thoughtful and interesting, because I know then I can ask people in return. So I spent time building that and realized the amazing people I discovered on it. I mean, I've discovered so many great people that we even got them on Real Vision in the end, people I found on Twitter. But what I then found, it became super powerful because I built this kind of trust and following. I don't have the biggest following in the world, but maybe I've got 70,000 people who follow me. But the point being is I built a trust, so I can go and ask the community something. And oh my God, it's that hive mind. I can get any answer. So it was I realized this in 2014. I was starting to get really bearish on oil. And I could tell from the charts, and I had a hunch and a few bits of information how I was building a macro thesis. So I went onto Twitter and said, listen, help me understand what's going on in oil, because I think it's going to collapse. And there was I had anonymous people who were running the hedging book for the world's largest fracking firms. I found this shy girl, who was based up in Montreal, who's just an amazing brain for everything energy related and historically market related and just so many people. And then I realized, okay, this is one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. It's the way to crowdsource intelligence.
That's brilliant. I mean, and that not necessarily Twitter, but the little Fin-twit community.
Yes.
Now you've kind of formed, like you said, this audience because of the value you provide. At times, do you feel like you're an antagonist in terms of, in sometimes a positive way to kind of generate the conversation, but maybe in other kind of, I know Twitter's a nasty place sometimes. So it's like, you got to be like, hey, here's my thoughts. Don't attack me.
Yeah. And I purposely, I don't try. Again, I don't try and create a persona. So if I'm putting it out there, it's usually because I'm trying to think something through, or I think there's something really observably interesting, and I generally don't know what it means. So often that's the process of me writing Global Macro Investor, or thinking about stuff, because it's coming out and I'm posting it. I get some comments back, but people generally are great. But there's a bunch of people who just want to be dicks. And because the anonymity of the internet, that they wouldn't do it to your face. No. And luckily I don't get too much of it. Other people, because I purposely try not to bait people, but other people purposely bait people because it's kind of fun. I don't do it. So I don't get too much of it. Occasionally I get thrown into some terrible discussion of which, you have to politely walk away eventually.
Anything Bitcoin related.
Anything Bitcoin related. If you get in the gold currency community, that's a bit problematic. I got into climate change denial Twitter for a while. That was quite an interesting one as well. Okay,
good to know. I'm going to stay away from that one. So you start this venture with Real Vision, and in general, again, from what I gather from your ethos, it's leveling the playing field. It's busting down the door so that people have greater access to this information. You're one of the deepest thinkers that I've come across, both in that Real Vision community, the Fin-twit community. The information is there, right? And we'll get into your experience growing this business in a minute, because I think there's a lot that entrepreneurs and investors can gather from it. But is there a certain disappointment, perhaps, in how people aren't taking the information that you're putting out there, whether it be Twitter or Real Vision, and starting to develop their own thought process and become deep thinkers? That's the whole point of exposing this information, so people can kind of digest it themselves. And like we were talking earlier off air, the way social media just creates this dopamine drip. Do you think people are just breathing through the information as just something else to digest and not really putting it into their arsenal of thought.
The fact that we're having this conversation shows that it works, because you've come from outside of the financial system, in one area, the mortgage part, and you come in to the heart of it, right? And so it's showing that it does work. But there are a lot of people who don't want to do that. A lot of people who want the shortcut. Unfortunately, there is no shortcut. Following a guru is not going to make anybody wealthy. It's not going to protect you. There are no gurus, right? We're all trying to figure this shit out. Some people have more experience than others in this particular area. So that's a great thing, to be able to use their experience to learn how to do it yourself. But if you don't own it, it's the same in business. If you don't own something, you can't succeed. It is pure luck if you do.
Agreed. So tell us how it started. What was the final kickoff? You have no experience in this field whatsoever. No. If you don't mind, also share what when you're telling the story, make sure you share your early motto as a.
I was just thinking that will come up. So I got an email after the end game. The end game came out in whenever it was, 2012. By 2000 and the end of the year, Grant Williams had written a review of the end of the year. I didn't know anything about Grant Williams. I got an email from a friend saying, "Hey, this guy's written about you." So I read the article, and it was saying that my article was the biggest finance article that had ever been published on the internet. I'm like, wow. So I reached out to Grant and said, "Oh, thank you very much for writing that kind of article about you." And he said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be in Spain this summer, passing through, going to a wedding. Can I come and see you?" Sure. So we went out for dinner, myself, him, and a guy who's my macro analyst, Remy Tito, who'd also had been involved in technology. We had dinner in Spain, a few glasses of wine, and Grant had started making videos, just the odd one at a conference and stuff, to try and communicate better some of his ideas. And Grant's a great communicator. So it was within that minute of going, okay, communicate large groups of people. The TV business is changing. A friend of mine was running the largest independent television company in the UK, and I talked to him about what was going on in 2007, earlier on. I said, what's going on with this industry? He said, it's all changed. I said, what's happened? He said, YouTube. I said, but this is cat videos. This is 2007. There was only cat videos.
Right.
And he's like, no. Nobody needs a broadcasting license, and anybody can start a television company, because on demand is so disruptive versus live. It's so cheap. I'm like, wow. Anyway, so cut forward. So I'm sitting with Grant. I'm like, okay, that conversation came into my head. Disrupt that. The newsletter business. Oh, well, that's going to go to video, obviously, because video, here's a newsletter writer communicating by video.
Yeah, nobody wants to read.
And I saw the power of the internet and how storytelling could work as well. And we just went, I wonder if we could start a video company that's like a newsletter. That was our original concept. And then we started fleshing it out. We brought in Damien, who lived in the same village in Spain as me. So Damien came out of advertising and media. So we brought him in on the conversation because him and I have been talking about disruption for a long time. And we started throwing the idea around, and Real Vision came out. So then we thought, okay, how do we start this? So we put some money in, and we went to a web development company, and we asked them to build this platform for us. So they built the platform. We launched on September the 5th, I think it was, 2014. We had 1,500 people sign up without having ever seen a video from Grant, and paid us $200. So we launched, the thing crashes. It can't deal with.
No. Be clear. Basically the tech crash, not your business.
The tech crashed. So the tech crash meaning it wouldn't launch all the different web browsers. So we go down the rabbit hole of them fixing with this company charging us more and more money. We're $1 million in the hole now, and we have a website that doesn't properly work, but we have an audience that likes our videos. And we're starting to figure out how the hell to do video. I've hired a videographer from a bar in Little Cayman, a population of 140. We're kind of figuring shit out on the route, but we don't have a site that works properly. We had to invent a third-party founder called Milton, because the four of us were running customer services around the world. Grant in Singapore, I think I was in Miami at the time, Remy in Spain, and Damien in London. We were running a 24-hour help desk, pretending we weren't us. So we had to invent Milton, a ventriloquist dummy, to deal with all the complaints. So anyway, one of our customers reached out to, while we were building this website, we came across the ethos of the firm, which was when these web guys go, well, what do you guys know about building, the Netflix of finance? And I just went, well, we know fuck about fuck. And we thought it was great because it kept us honest, because we didn't know what we were doing, so we could truly disrupt. Because if you don't know how everybody else does it, you'd naturally just do it differently, because you're not full of the inherent biases and anchoring biases that other people have. So that is what happened. And then we got this, and this is a typical Real Vision story. We get an email from a guy saying, hi, my name is Rickard. I'm Swedish. I'm based in Malaysia. I'm a Java programmer. And I've gone through your website and I can steal all your customers' email addresses, and you fucked up. You've completely built this wrong. This is terrible. You built it as a website. It's not supposed to be a website. It's supposed to be a software. It's a SaaS product, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, we didn't want to hear it, but we knew, right? This is $1 million we just torched.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what do we have to do? He goes, you have to rewrite it. I'm like, well, could you maybe help us?
Oh, he knew what he was doing.
And he was like, yeah. And he literally is a genius. And so he built it from scratch himself in like 2 months. It was unbelievable. And then we ended up hiring the BBC, some of the BBC iPlayer video on demand team, great bunch of guys. And then that started us on the journey. So we've now got great technology, but it took us a lot of learning. And you and I have swapped emails over the time. You understand how much learning that I've had to go through, how much failing, iterating, improving, learning, failing, iterating, improving, learning that you have to do. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I give you a lot of credit because really that core team, I don't know Grant, haven't really communicated him, but just the energy he puts off, I imagine he's the same type, but you handled all of it so humbly, even to this day, where it could have been a bit of that chip on your shoulder, like, dude, I was, living on a mountain in Spain, and like, what am I doing? And so as you were kind of getting deeper and deeper into the trenches, share some of those horror stories. I mean, I think you just kind of glazed over it. I mean, were there those moments where you're just like, dude, fuck this? Like, what?
That moment has come. I literally don't know how many times that moment's come when I'm just thinking, I just don't see a way out. Whether it's we're all going to go bust, or whether it's I just can't. Things like the ridiculous mistakes that you make, like, well, we can do this in the Cayman Islands. No. Because what you have to do is every single editor, producer, you basically have to take their family around the island, show them, get them into schools. Like, this is not a scalable business model. It's a lifestyle hobby business if you're doing that. But we got up to 45 people here. And then one day I realized that we were basically running on freelancers, and we just couldn't hire the people we wanted, and we needed to expand. And I just looked around, and we were just going to take a new office space here. And I just went, I called the guys up and said, we can't do this. We got to go to New York. Because I was listening to a Reid Hoffman Masters of Scale podcast.
Okay.
And Reid had said, if anybody ever pitches me an idea in technology and they're not based in Silicon Valley, they better have a damn good reason, because they're purposely taking the decision not to get the best lawyers, staff, programmers, infrastructure, tech culture on earth. He said, there may be a reason why you're in Tel Aviv, London, Berlin, whatever it may be, and it could be valid. But if it's not valid, you're out my door. And that stopped me. I was like, stop the podcast. I'm like, what are we thinking? If you're trying to be a global media company, we have ambition.
In a third world country.
Yeah. Cayman's, well, sort of second world. But
well, Hawaii's not third world either, but it ain't. You're not going to start a media company here either.
No. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So we went to New York, got a WeWork space, and cut to the second hardest thing is then trying to scale a business in New York while you're living in Cayman, and you're living out of WeWork space. There's not enough meeting space. You've gone from 0 to 45 staff in New York in 3 months. So you've hired too fast. You need to figure it out. You've got too many holes, and you're creaking at the seams. And at this stage, you can't sleep. You have no time. You're trying just to desperately stop it all falling apart.
Well, this is a great story, because I think from the outside, especially now, if anybody comes to Real Vision now and it's polished, the depth of content you have is, I mean, scroll forever type of thing. I remember back when it was 5 videos, one on Bitcoin, one with you and Kyle Bass, and like one like 5-minute video. And that was like,
That's
I
right.
just watched the Kyle Bass video like 10 times. I was just like, this is worth the price for admission. So I think it's a great story because from the outset now, it's like, well, who's Raoul and who are these people? And like, oh, these are Wall Street guys who are just, swimming in their vault of gold and just wanted to throw some money at, a media company. And here they go.
No,
Now they got a successful media
it's
company.
Completely the opposite. This has been blood, sweat, and a lot of tears, a lot of pain, and a lot of alcohol.
Just so the audience knows, so they can send you gifts as well. What's your preferred poison?
My preferred poison is rum, although it likes me less these days.
I understand. Is that because of all the stress from Real Vision?
Probably.
Probably.
So wine is my general choice. My go-to is wine or even champagne, but rum is where my heart is.
And are you happy doing this back and forth between New York and Cayman now? Is it a good balance finally?
No, it's not a good balance, but there is sacrifices in all of this. I mean, literally nothing is easy. And that is the one thing I can't recommend enough. If anybody wants to go on the entrepreneurial journey, read the book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. It is the only book about entrepreneurialism that is true. All of the rest of them is, I had this great idea and we scaled it and I became rich and aren't I? Ben Horowitz is the gruesome battle of the trenches. The kind of desperate terror, the midnight fears, the sleepless nights, and what it actually takes to succeed. That book is so damn useful. I cannot recommend it enough because it is the only honest truth. And that was kind of what we thought about with Real Vision as well, is we didn't believe in the kind of big hair, polished
Even though you
teeth.
were from the 80s.
Even though I was from the 80s and I was a wham boy at some point, I didn't want, that was not what we stood for. It was for that truth. The financial system is not good. Things are not perfect. There are risks there. There are parts of this story you need to be told. And that was the thing about that Ben Horowitz book. And there is a myth of entrepreneurialism right now. And unfortunately, it's that everyone's in too high a pedestal. And it needs to go down to really what it takes, because people still are in the kind of chosen talent of TV, suddenly become rich and famous without realizing what it actually takes.
Now, was there a stage during the process when you started to get a little bit momentum, and then were there people coming out of the woodworks trying to get their hand in the pie at that point? Was there a bit of an experience there as like, oh, maybe we're catching fire? And even if not, like how much did it start to become like protecting your baby?
No, I think everyone struggled to understand what we're doing. So we have a very big plan, and you and I have had these conversations. You're like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, look, what you're seeing is this small bit. What I'm trying to get to is here, and we've got to make a few mistakes and a few zigzags to get to where I'm going. So a lot of people didn't see what we were doing. So we got stuck, and still to this day, and it's going on right now on the platform, is we're testing something and people fear change. They don't like change because they're very passionate about Real Vision. So everyone has what Real Vision is to them. And that's great. And I've learned this because everybody will tell me, okay, this is what you need to do for content. You need more of X. And everybody's view is different, and they're all right.
Right.
They're absolutely right. Problem is we need 10 times as much content. But when you do that, like we're having right now, is our content has tripled in the last year and a half, because you need to attract a marginal user to grow a business, because the core base of hard finance people is not a scalable group. But what happens is
Which we talked about.
Yeah, they see other content. They're like, what the fuck is this content? I'm like, no, you've got exactly the same content. In fact, more of your content than you've ever had. But now you're seeing this other stuff. You've forgotten that you've got all this stuff. And so, it's the management of all this kind of stuff is super fascinating.
So the concept of Real Vision, I think you're not alone in that like revolution, right? In terms of there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of poison in the financial system, and you did some really early videos, and maybe one of those things that you can consider doing on the platform is resurrecting some of those, because I feel blessed that I was part of that early process where I wasn't swimming through 2,000 videos, and I literally could binge on the same things and really let some of these concepts sink in. But you did some early stuff. It was kind of like mock interviews, you and Grant sitting in a room. And I wanted to kind of expose some of these ideas so that maybe that layman person understands that Real Vision isn't about putting on some sort of complicated trade and hearing it from a guru. It's if you can just watch a handful of these videos and have your eyeballs open up, like understand what's really going on in the background, how this financial system really works, maybe you can start making decisions for yourself where you're not just completely wiped out when something catastrophic happens, because there's all these knock-on effects or some sort of third party.
That's crucial. And the DNA is still on the platform. It's all there, and we're going to move towards some sort of content recommendation engine to help people navigate this, because this is a very important part. Is one of the reasons behind it. We don't have a view on Real Vision. Purposely, it's neutral. But we do have a view that people need to be given more information and be brought up the learning curve, because the world of finance, as 2008 proved, is still a deeply unbalanced and dangerous place for people's savings. Because if you think about the outcomes, is you spend your whole life saving money to retire. And if somewhere near that end goal of retirement, you lose your savings, well, then your entire worth of your life, of what you've done, the reason you went to work every day, the reason you jumped on planes or drove cars or knocked on doors, all goes out of the window. And people don't realize that, particularly financial media, is that you do have a fiduciary responsibility to people. It's their life savings.
Totally.
And so we do care. And yes, sometimes the information is a bit difficult for people, but bear with it and try and go with the stories, and it'll soon kind of, it's like learning a language. Suddenly it kind of unveils itself and you're like, oh, wow, I now understand the language of finance. I understand, what I should be thinking about. Does cryptocurrency offer a future for me? Is that my way that I can make a difference to my life? Or what do I need to do with my savings? Or how do I need to think about retirement? Or how do I need to think about career? All of these things, they're all there. There's incredible learning.
There is. And one bit of video, and I want to ask you a few quick questions about some of the content. There's a very early video, and you were talking about, I don't know if it's a International Bank of Settlements or whatever it is, but this idea that, when somebody owns a bond, they don't actually own the bond. When somebody owns a stock, they don't actually own a stock. It's kind of trickle down to this epicenter where everything is basically hypothecated. Can you kind of hash that one bit?
Yeah,
I think that's an eye opener. And if people can kind of be like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe that draws them into some of this deeper content on Real Vision.
So in the financial system, there's very little ownership. And we understood this if you go back and understand that when everyone said when Lehman Brothers went under, or AIG, they're still trying to figure out some of the trades. Why is that? Because you kind of think, well, I own my car. I know I own my car, and I own the computer I'm talking on. So it's my computer. But in the finance world, you don't. Because what happens is they all get pooled. And even if they tell you it's not pooled, that it's in your name, by the time it actually gets to the very end, which is the clearinghouse, the DTCC in the US and Euroclear in Europe and most of the rest of the world, at the heart of those are clearing agents and custody. They custody your assets. The problem is Euroclear had to go for a $50 billion loan back in 2008. It almost went under because when Lehman were going bust, everyone was like, whoa, somebody's not going to pay. So the system stopped. None of the cash was going around. So the trades couldn't settle. So the ECB said, we'll lend you the money because it'll all come out. It'll be fine. And luckily it was fine. So the ECB put money in the system and nobody really knew anything about it. However, I asked the ECB, I said, so when you gave the loan to Euroclear, what collateral did you take against the loan? Because they have to. And they're like, oh, we took trades, the stuff from the accounts. We're like, but Euroclear don't own those. The custody firms do. They're like, no. When it gets to Euroclear between us and the ECB, it is Euroclear's assets. So I said, but what happens if somebody defaulted then? And they didn't want to answer that question. That asked the DTCC the same thing. And they're saying the same thing, is essentially they will bail out. The Fed will bail them out, and they would pledge customer assets against the loan. So if anything goes wrong, particularly if sovereign government goes bust, which came very close to 2012, the whole system stops because all the collateral in the system goes away, and basically there's nobody to pay it back. And your life savings are in that pool.
Now, has this become kind of part of the, I don't want to say the Armageddon attitude of own gold, own land, own cattle? Is this very much like if you can't hold it, like a computer screen, like you're just saying, that you have this counterparty risk where the people at the very top, the central banks, these clearing agents, at the end of the day, they're going to confiscate whatever they need to because they're the final, the buck stops with them. So if you don't really have something in hand, if it's any one of these financial assets, whether they're digital or on a physical ledger, you really don't own them.
I think that's correct. And I think so, therefore, no, it depends how nervous you are of that whole situation. So there are people who are not nervous at all. And I mean, the whole financial, it's odd because even all the big hedge fund managers, they kind of know this. So everything is trading that end game. So you see that the next round of QE, whatever's going to come out of Europe, the appointment of Christine Lagarde. I mean, what's interesting about that, Lagarde, is what's interesting about that is that she is a lawyer and a politician. Why would you do that at the head of the ECB? Because they know that monetary policy has finished. So the next thing has to be fiscal. It has to be some banking alliance. It's going to be bailing out of the European banking system. It's going to require some complex skills. That's going to require what Hank Paulson kind of did, was go around all the government and get money and sort this out. So, the system's changing, and you do need some protection of that. And everybody knows that that's where we're going. In Japan, they own the central bank own most of the bond market. At some point, they'll own it all. What does that mean? Yeah. We don't know, but that's a debt jubilee, and that's been around since biblical times. My guess is the currency collapses. But what does that make you want to do if you're a Japanese household? Maybe you want to own some different assets or diversify. So yeah, there is that period is still coming. Something could change. You could create a parallel financial system before that happens. And that is the hope.
Is that a far-fetched hope? Is that a Star Wars Episode 1 hope?
I don't think so. I think it is actually, I have never seen so much intellectual capital going into one thing before as I have in fintech, and particularly into crypto, blockchain, digitization of assets, and the internet of value, call it. That whole thing is a enormous parallel financial universe that's developing at such a rate, you can't get your head around it. Most people don't understand it because they're seeing bits of it. And so they're like, it's not a currency, it's not gold. No, it's not any of those things. It's an entirely different architecture on how to think about things. As everything goes digital in the end, think of it as music or anything that's gone digital, photography, video. In the end, anything digital has a value because it becomes real.
Interesting. And to your point before, a lot of this is formulating out of disruption. So you have entrepreneurs working on these things. Even in a lot of cases, demographically speaking, people who've been rejected from the current system. And when you have that, you have this creative inertia where you can't say it, like you're saying, any one of these things, because at the end of the day, we don't really know how it's going to develop, but the amount of momentum behind it, it can't be ignored.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is my kind of community in finance is the macro guys. So macro guys they're the big picture thinkers. They live in the future. They try and solve the global puzzle and look for the best risk reward. The famous kind of gunslingers of Stan Druckenmiller, George Soros, Paul Tudor Jones, these kind of guys. What's interesting is it started with Dan Moorhead. Dan Moorhead used to work for Tiger. Dan has been on the platform a few times. Dan formed Pantera. It's got a big global macro fund. Then he saw Bitcoin. He went, fuck that. This is the biggest opportunity I've ever seen. This is all I do. So he started that. Then the next big person to drop for me was probably Novo. So Mike Novogratz, another old friend of mine, a Goldman Sachs partner, became immensely wealthy running Fortress, which is a massive credit business plus a huge global macro hedge fund. Novo left Fortress and went to crypto 100%. I'm like, wow, opportunity set is, and he became a billionaire in crypto very quickly. Then Mark Yusko, who has been on Real Vision a lot, suddenly he's a macro guy.
Yeah.
Completely crypto. I'm just looking at my board because of a bunch of other people. There's Jim Pilotta, been on the platform, another friend of mine, another kind of macro guy, used to work for Tudor. Suddenly, before you know it, half his wealth is in crypto. John Burbank, he then leads the industry. Yeah. He's one of the smartest macro guys I've ever met. Crypto. I'm like, holy shit. Dan Tapiero, who has been on the platform, he's now just basically left the macro business. He's like, it's crypto.
I love crypto.
You hear it once or twice. Yeah. By the time you've got like 10 of the smartest people you've ever known going into this, it's real.
So, but to be clear, we're talking crypto as an ecosystem, not being evangelists for Bitcoin. It's way broader than just the
digitization of assets and the valuation of that. Now, whether that's creating payment systems, tokenization of the world, whether it's ownership, secured ledger, whether it's cryptocurrencies, all of that. It's all part of a much bigger picture, which is like a parallel universe that's being built in front of our eyes. And it's very difficult to see because it's so big. And because it's being built by the hive, there is no plan. Nobody's building a business. It's not Elon Musk trying to get from here to there. It is the hive mind building something, which is unbelievable. And it's happening at a rate I've never seen before.
Do you have any kind of insight or recommendation on how the average person can dangle on the fringe of that opportunity without rolling their money into something like a Bitcoin by itself? Is there another play for that that's a bit more?
I don't think so. I think it's Bitcoin. I think it's Bitcoin or nothing right now. And I think, you just adjust the amount. If something can go up 100x, you don't need to do so much of it, right? People need to understand sizing. I mean, I've just come across a guy on Twitter, unbelievable. He's unknown, and I will make sure he becomes very well known. I mean, this guy called Plan B has developed a model for the valuation of Bitcoin. It's a stock flow model. So it's based on the amount of coins that are in existence and the amount that trade and the amount that are coming, and looks at that and then compares it to gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and diamonds.
Wow.
And then with really deep maths, he's built this linear regression, which puts them all on the same line. And what happens is there is only gold and Bitcoin that have the same properties in how their stock flow model works, i.e. they trade like rare assets. Silver, platinum, palladium, and don't, because they are industrial assets and they have more supply and the stock and the flow is different. So it's basically to do with this, and he's built this really complex thing, and he shares it with everybody, and it basically shows that Bitcoin should go to it's $100,000 by 2020, and then up to $1 million. It's still exponential, just keeps going exponentially.
Is that a pairs trade? Is that a hedge, gold and Bitcoin, in regards to how the stock and flow?
Well, they can both go together, as we've seen, and I think the eventual outcome, if we start having to price in some sort of probability of the end game, call it whatever that is, then they're both going to go up, because regardless of people's views on cryptocurrency or gold, they're both like warring factions. They both actually care about the same thing, and they're just different ways of solving for the same problem. There's nothing wrong with owning some gold and a bit of crypto.
Yeah, well, people have to subscribe to Real Vision and get a little more granular on that. What are some of your favorite interviews so far? Things that have, even with your experience, had caused you to step back and kind of be like, wow.
One was a guy called James, I can't remember his name now, for Orbital Insights. And that was when I first realized how advanced the data world was. This is the guy, who was taking data from satellite imagery, looking at the shadows.
I remember that one.
The color of crops, the UV radiation coming off crops, the shadow on oil tanks, and figuring out literally economic statistics in real time using satellite data. And I'm like, oh my God, anything that we think we understand about the world, we don't understand.
Totally.
I also loved, because I was in the room, the Kyle Bass, John Burbank interview very early on.
Yep. The chain. When are you bringing the chain back?
It was too difficult to do.
Okay.
It was just too difficult to organize two people like that. But yeah, so that whole part of the chain I loved. So I started with Kyle, which was great because he's such a nice guy and so smart. But then Kyle being so humble, John Burbank he really looks up to. So we were at Kyle's ranch, and so he says, I'll interview John. I didn't know much about John. I just knew a lot of people thought he's a very, very smart guy. And Kyle sat down to talk to John, and first thing he asked, how do you size the position? Because Kyle, the insecure hedge fund manager is like, damn, I don't know how to size positions in different assets and everything else, which was so honest. And then John went through that. But then John's whole philosophy was super interesting. And then I said, John, who can you interview for the chain? He said, I've met this interesting guy called Charlie Songhurst, who I've never spoken to again. I met Charlie at the Four Seasons in San Francisco. He lived in Four Seasons hotels. He'd done a deal with them. And his luggage
sounds
would be
like something you would do.
And he just lived in Four Seasons hotels. And his luggage would be sent
bombs in real life.
Yeah, and he had been this wonder kid at Microsoft. He came out of Cambridge University, Microsoft, made a fortune out of Google, and he's just this incredible brain. And John had got him on, and he sat down and talked about Silicon Valley, and it's like blew my mind again. So that happens so often. I recently sat down with Mike Novogratz, and he told me a whole bunch of stuff about digitization of assets, of which I don't really understand until I just recently interviewed Barry Silver, and I'm like, oh God, nobody told me all of this. I didn't understand it. So there's so many bits of information that I've just stopped me. There's a guy called Joe Duran from United Capital, a big RIA firm. He's just sold to Goldman Sachs. He came on the platform, so Grant interviewed him, and he was like this calm, amazing management guru. But what he had is an incredible life story of hardship in South Africa. And he ended up using this kind of humble, calm, tranquil approach to business to build this business and manage people's money. He's been on the platform twice. They're both two of the best interviews I've ever seen. And Grant's done some killer interviews. I mean, the rawness of the interview as Hugh Hendry, just after Hugh Hendry had hung up his slinging boots, and Grant went to see him in St. Bart's. The rawness of Hugh, who I know pretty well, was special. And Mark Cohodes, I mean, extraordinary. To have somebody crying in a financial video and it being one of the best pieces of programming you've ever seen, amazing.
And a lot of these guys, again, I mean, I can't speak for you and being in that world, how familiar you are to these names. Some of them, like you said, you never even heard of and haven't spoken to since. But for the average guy, we would never in our lifetime know who that is. And now you can hunt them down on Twitter and watch the conversations, watch their thinking process. If you think of
the old world, John, is the degrees of separation mattered. Right? So your degree of separation from John Burbank is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Now not, it's me.
Yeah.
It's one person.
Totally.
Right? And Twitter changes the degrees of separation to one person. You have direct contact, or if not, somebody can introduce you. And LinkedIn works pretty well for that. But Twitter, if you're respecting and you add value to the community, somebody will always help you. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think that is like we were saying earlier on, the way Twitter was introduced to me was that it's this your own private Mensa. I'm following people. I mean, they have no idea the overall scope or demographic of their audience, but someone like me who's eager to close that separation gap now can do that so easily. Yeah. And because it's a sharing community, you're seeing people doing just that, sharing. It's no longer this like we got to keep it, between four walls.
And we really believe in the democratization of this information. I mean, that's what it's all about. There's no fairness in, because I work for Goldman Sachs, I get a lot more information than you. Sure, everyone has that informational edge, but right. The information gap was way too big, and too many people got hurt by that gap, and that's not right. It's unacceptable. So that gap should be as small as that, and that depends on how much extra you're willing to do to learn the incremental information. Some people build satellite video companies that measure the data. Okay, that's going to extremes, but that's what it takes.
So as part of that mission, how far along do you think you've come, and have you achieved that objective so far?
No, we've achieved the objective in a small scale, and that was subscription. Subscription it's self-limiting, really. And it's important because we believe in subscription, because we believe in creating that pure environment, and we think there is a value to what we do as a business. As an entrepreneur, there should be a value. But really, to achieve what we need a big audience, scale. And we realized recently we had a pretty bad job of our YouTube channel, but it was starting to grow. And then I did a piece called the Retirement Crisis. Okay. You remember that? That retirement crisis, suddenly we looked on YouTube and it had 1.2 million views. We're like, wow. Whoa, what's happened here? And then the Venezuela documentary, 1.3 million views. We're like, okay. And then we started thinking through the free strategy and, okay, how do we reach a broader audience? We have so much content on Real Vision. To give a slice of Real Vision, maybe 20% of it, create a free channel, get people involved, don't ask them for money, let them understand. And then if they want to come and join us on our journey and come part of the deeper part, great. If not, if I can still help you in your financial journey, that's great too.
Which is very much the Twitter attitude. Give, and eventually that's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
And I think that the broad value, as well as the microscopic takeaways people can get from Real Vision, but the overarching value that's there, I still don't think people understand. And so I think that the fact that you're now focusing more on providing that free content is going to be, I think, pivotal for your success, but really pivotal for that reaching that objective, because now people are going to start to be able to digest who you really are. And this isn't, a video from 2014 where you're still figuring it out. I mean, the quality now is as good as you're going to get in a professional studio. Editing is top notch.
We are bizarre now, a professional studio. I can't quite understand that myself, but we've got this beautiful studio. We've got people who know what they're doing. We're not staffed with people who don't know. It's extraordinary. We've kind of know what we're doing now. There's a lot of things we don't know. Business itself is a learning process, but making great content, we know that better than anybody else in the world now. And that we can stake our claim on is that we know that, and we know how to tell financial stories that matter. We don't get everything right, but we know overall there's nothing close to the quality of Real Vision anywhere in the world in financial storytelling and telling the stories that really matter. So I'm super proud of that. But now my job is to scale it. I need to get it to a much bigger audience and build a much larger business. And we're also finding that businesses are coming to us as well, saying, listen, one of the two things we found that's unique about Real Vision, they're absolutely extraordinary. The financial world is generally an older demographic. Mm-hmm. Ours is 76% millennial and Gen X. They're 40% earn over $200,000 a year, 40% have over $500,000 of savings, and 80% have a bachelor's degree. So they're young, wealthy, smart, and they're hyper engaged in Real Vision. So our engagement statistics are unparalleled in the history of the media business. And we've checked this out. We've never found anybody with better engagement. So engagement is measured as somebody who starts a video, watches it to the end. On YouTube, it's about 4%. On Facebook, it's about 4%. YouTube's about 20%. By the time you get to the Olympics primetime US television, it's about 51%. The football or soccer World Cup final, the biggest television event on earth, 71% engagement. Every single show on Real Vision, regardless of whether it's 10 minutes long or 2.5 hours long, has 87% or higher.
That's awesome.
So people watch 87% of a 2.5 hour video. So companies are coming to us, everybody from investment banks to asset management firms to RIAs saying, hey, listen, You guys can engage people in finance. Nobody else can. Everyone makes boring finance videos. They're saying, can you help us? So we're doing so much, on that side as well. So we've suddenly realized a big B2B side of our business as well.
Oh, fantastic. So as this journey has progressed, is there a particular bit of advice that you can provide to other entrepreneurs that are either in this, I can't take it anymore, I'm ready to quit, or at the very early stage type person as well?
Yes, there's a few things that really helped me. I think The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, you will know if you can't do it. Reading that book, you'll know whether you can do it or not. I think that's really important we've seen a lot of people in our business. It's a really fast-paced, really hard working environment. I'm not trying to build a Goldman Sachs work ethic here. It's just what it is to survive. So some people just don't last that journey. So that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So that's worth reading. I think The Lean Startup was incredibly useful. Once you understand, and that basically book is about, don't build catastrophic failure into things that you do. Don't do what we did with the website with the big ta-da, $1 million down the drain, the whole thing's fucked, right? That's how you destroy businesses. What you need to do is minimum viable product, launch, learn, iterate, improve. That way you can have multiple small points of failure and not break your business.
Phenomenal advice.
That is so useful in everything. Just test something. Yeah. Test the most ridiculously simple version of something. Like, I think we might have spoken in the past about referrals, right? So how do you test that? Well, just write people an email saying, hey, listen, here's a video, refer this to your friends. Okay, did that work? Yes. What was the referral rate? Okay, it was X. Okay, that means we could probably try something different. Should we build a bit of tech around that? Then you try it again. This way, as opposed to launching the big referral thing, you spent 4 months building and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that way. You don't have the big flop. And the other thing that we do that's a really core thing of Real Vision that I've really helped, as part of the same process, I call it the collaborative method. It's to stop catastrophic failure, is if somebody has an idea, you get a group of stakeholders first, you talk about it, you get everybody's opinions, they go away, they then start developing the first MVP or first idea based around that, and you check in en route. And it's not there to stop people developing great ideas, it's to make sure there's no end moment that they didn't go, oh, I forgot to talk to marketing about that. So you've just launched something and nobody knows about it, or marketing forgot to speak to tech about this incredible new thing and we've got no landing pages, nothing works, it's all broke. Right. And, it's really simple to screw things up. So collaborate, get communal brain power onto it, and everybody buys into something, and that really helps.
It's almost like very summing it up in a way that it's you got to be invested in the long game. It's so many people jump into it thinking they're going to do the big ta-da and then be posting a photo with their Lamborghini, and at the end of the day, it's you blow through your capex, and you're not there to keep fighting the fight the next day, where you eventually figure it out because you've tried everything else.
So Reid Hoffman said, and it's another truism, is a startup, when you're running on negative cash flow, which is what most startups do now, is basically jumping off a cliff and learning how to assemble an aeroplane on the way down.
I think you quoted that in Twitter, actually.
And it is spot on. It is equally terrifying, exciting, stimulating, all at the same time. So it's not for the faint-hearted.
And the only way you're going to find a way to put it together is when you're coming closer and closer with the ground. So that's right.
It is.
That motivator is how innovation happens.
It is. Motivation comes out of need, and most of us know that you're never going to revise for an exam until the last minute, because unless you've got a bit of pressure, you can't do it, right? So it does help, and that's why innovation comes out of it, because you need to create solutions for problems. So it's a really rewarding process, incredibly rewarding.
Raoul, I appreciate the time. I love all the information. You've taken us from your journey as, we could call it, as an investment banker, investment person. Then you became the original travel financial blogger. And now you're CEO of a media company that's finding its way through the dark and is starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is there a way that people can find more information about you, especially Real Vision, get involved, do a free trial? How's that work when he hears this?
Thank you. Firstly, find me on Twitter at Raoul, Raoul GMI. I'm pretty active and I engage with people all the time, so feel free to engage. Also, just the easiest thing for Real Vision, go to realvision.com/free, and there's the free version. And just, put in your email address. You get to go through the whole thing, use all the content, enjoy it. And then if you want to know more, realvision.com, and there's a subscription. It's only $180 a year, and it's like having the world's greatest financial advisors at your fingertips 24 hours a day. The value proposition is so ludicrous, as you know, John.
I've forgotten what it cost, because when early on you did the founders where we paid like a bunch for a long. So I haven't paid a subscription in a long time, because we paid a upfront at one point. I laugh because it's like $189 a year for that access. Is just what yeah.
And I don't say it, just because, I'm trying to promote my product or anything. No, it's ridiculous. It's laughable. And the reason we did that is, again, another interesting little business thing, is goddamn people are anchored on stuff. So they're anchored on TV pricing. And so TV pricing, Netflix.
Interesting.
So regardless of the value proposition, Netflix's value proposition is so crazy as well.
Right.
It's like having 50,000 cinemas in your lounge. It's ridiculous value proposition. And so Real Vision has had to do the same because Netflix set the pricing model, which is not the most profitable pricing model in the world.
No, they're not making any money, but
no, and they've got huge scale and they still can't make money out of it.
Yeah.
But it's just very interesting. So anyway, it's $180 a year. It's TV pricing.
It is. It's comedy. That's the price. I think everybody, if nothing else, give it a year. Give it a year. What you'll take away from it in terms of access to information, thought processes. You don't have to be an investor. You do not have to be a trader. You don't have to be involved in that as a profession or even as a hobby. This is just basic stuff. If you buy things with money, which I'm pretty sure 99.9% of people aren't trading wampum for bread today, you got to understand some of this stuff, because it affects you today, it will affect you tomorrow. And at the end of the day, it's going to affect you at the worst possible time if you're not prepared.
Look, in the end, you work. If you're lucky enough to work, you work, and that is operating within the economy. If you're lucky enough to own a house, you probably have a mortgage, which is a very financialized part of the economy.
Yep.
And you're trying to save for retirement, which is all part of the financial economy. You can't avoid it. So everyone can pretend I don't know anything about finance. You don't have an excuse, because all of your future is tied up in the thing that you're saying, I don't know anything about that. It's confusing. That's not a risk you really want to take, right? It's like driving a car not ever having had a driving license. Why would you do that? A driving lesson, Why would you do that? You need some skill set. Or flying a plane without having a pilot, having never flown a plane. Well, I'm just going to get in this and drive it. No. And that's what people are doing with their finances. So we're trying to just help.
I think that nails it on the head. Raoul, thank you so much. It's been fantastic. You've been a friend to me throughout this entire process. It's been an incredible journey watching the whole thing transpire. I know you're going to keep, reaching higher and higher levels and eventually completely disrupt the whole thing. So thank you for allowing me to be part of that process.
No, thank you as well. You played always an active role, and I always appreciate that.
You're a humble man, despite all you've accomplished, and we're grateful for that. So thanks, Raoul. I appreciate it, man. You have a good time, and we'll talk soon.
Perfect. I look forward to it.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Money MBA Podcast with your host, Jonathan Kutsmita.
It's also my pleasure to see to it that decent, hardworking people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates.
To access more great content, visit us online at moneymba.com.
That's where the money is. And more than that, control.
There's only one person in the world to decide what I'm going to do, and that's me.
And I am deadly serious about that. That's it. I'm done.